Well, hello, COS supporters, and welcome back to COS Live. It is 2025, and we have hit the ground running this legislative season. We are about to hear debate and a floor vote in the South Dakota Senate. You will hear it referred to as SJR 502. I am Andrew Lusch. I will be your host for this edition of COS Live. And of course, I am joined by Rita Peters, who is our Senior Vice President for Legislative Affairs. Rita, it is great to be back with you in 2025. Really, really excited. This is possibly going to be our first big victory for the year. Can you get our viewers caught up and just kind of give us a rundown of what to expect today?
Sure will, Andrew. And it is great to be back with you. And I'm so excited that this is actually our first program that you and I get to be on together, co-hosting for the year, because I think it's going to be a doozy. But yeah, to give our viewers some background, 19 states have already passed our Article 5 application calling for a convention to propose amendments to the U.S. Constitution on 3 topics: imposing fiscal restraints on the federal government, limiting the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, and setting term limits for members of Congress and other federal officials. We are using the Constitution to save it, to propose amendments that will force the feds to abide by sane fiscal policy, restore and reinvigorate constitutional limits, and send the swamp monsters packing. Now, in addition to the 19 states that have already passed our COS application, our resolution is being considered by several more states this year. They're really just getting started, but so far, in addition to South Dakota, our application's been introduced in New Hampshire, New Jersey, Minnesota, Montana, Wyoming, and I may even be missing 1 or 2, but many more states are expected to introduce our resolution in the coming weeks. So how did we get here? Well, it all starts with we the people. The Convention of States South Dakota volunteer team has been busy building support across the state and in the legislature. And if you were able to watch the committee hearing in the South Dakota Senate last Friday, you saw those supporters or heard them. They came out in droves. And I have heard that it is very difficult to get to Pierre, South Dakota, especially in the dead of winter. But our volunteers are faithful and committed, dedicated patriots, and they came out, and I can tell you they made quite an impression on that South Dakota Senate committee, along with, of course, Senator Rick Santorum, who is also there to give testimony. Over 16,000 South Dakotans have signed the Convention of States petition asking their state legislators to vote yes for a Convention of States. And scientific polling shows that a whopping 72% of South Dakotans support the COS resolution to rein in federal tyranny. To so many, it just seems like a no-brainer. And as I said, just last Friday, the South Dakota Senate State Affairs Committee heard public testimony on this resolution. It was our first hearing of the year. Senator Rick Santorum gave impressive expert testimony. And then in an overwhelming victory, the committee voted 8-1 with a do pass recommendation, which then sends our resolution to the full Senate for a vote. And if you've been watching hearings for a while and floor votes, you know that in a lot of states, they have multiple rounds of voting on a resolution. Well, not in South Dakota. So today, there will just be this one full floor vote in the Senate on our resolution, which is SJR 502. And if the Senate votes to pass our resolution, that then sends it over to the House, where it will go through the same sort of process. It'll get assigned to a committee. Then we'll get a committee hearing date where they will take public and expert testimony again. And then if it passes that committee in the House, it'll go to the full House for a floor vote. And if it succeeds in all of those steps, folks, South Dakota could very well be state number 20 to pass our COS application. And I want to invite you all to stay tuned after the debate and the vote, because Regional Director Deanna Beckett is standing by to give us her live reaction to today's vote. So, Andrew, how are you feel? You're a regional director as well. So, how are you feeling about all of this? Have you caught the excitement?
Absolutely, Rita. I am so excited. I've been pumped since day one of legislative season. This is what we live for at Convention of States, right here. When we start seeing our resolution get introduced into state legislatures across the country, just a handful to start right now. But as we really get into the full swing, our resolution is going to be in several state legislatures, and it's always so exciting to see the debate, the committee hearings. Of course, I loved hearing Senator Rick Santorum give expert testimony the other week in that Senate committee hearing. It was just so good to have a champion in Rick Santorum out there with the patriots and volunteers in South Dakota. So I'm really excited. I'm really pumped. And you know what, Rita?
Yeah.
I kind of got that feeling that we had in 2022 when we had some early victories right out the gate. And I'm hoping that's going to be the case here, because 2022 was a banner year for us. I believe we got 4 states. We had Nebraska, Wisconsin, South Carolina, and West Virginia, I believe we had in 2022. And boy, it was just one victory after the next. And it was so exciting. And you know what? 2025 just has a really good feeling so far. There's a new administration coming in. There's a new person at the top of the executive branch. And I don't know if you've been paying attention or listening to what he wants to do, but he really wants to take an axe to the federal government and limit the power. He wants to limit the terms of offices for elected officials. So, you know, we agree with that stuff too, but we want to see it cemented through constitutional amendments. Right. So as you can see, I'm really excited, Rita. I'd love to hear, how excited are you right now with this coming floor debate and vote, and then just the legislative season that's really kicked off?
I am feeling bullish on 2025, Andrew, and especially on South Dakota. And I do want to point out that this is really early in the season to be already having a floor vote. We were really fast tracked in the South Dakota Senate. Our primary sponsor there, Jim Mehlhaff, is just a huge champion for COS. And we've actually got a lot of great champions for COS in the South Dakota Senate and House this year. So I'm really excited. I feel like you do. It's going to be a banner year. And yeah, we are so on board for so many of the reforms that the Trump administration wants to make. But as you pointed out, Andrew, we want to cement those reforms. And we are the way to do that, because anything that the Trump administration does could be undone by the next administration that comes in. But by using a convention of states to put the federal government back in its constitutional box, that makes those changes permanent so that they can't be quickly undone by the next administration. So I'm really excited about this. And while we're waiting, so producer G will put on the live stream of the South Dakota Senate as soon as, you know, it's ready and we're getting close to our resolution debate and floor vote. But just to give you a little background information heading into this, there's not much on the calendar today in the South Dakota Senate, and that is because, as I said before, we're early in session. So this is really an indication that there is excitement behind our resolution in South Dakota this year. I understand there was a consent calendar that they're going to vote on today. When they start, they should have started right around the top of the hour if they started on time. So consent calendar, that's usually pretty quick. And then my understanding was that there were only 2 other items for them to take up in the South Dakota Senate today, and we are the second. So here we go. Let's listen in.
Consideration of committee reports. Senator Mehlhaff moved that the reports of the Standing Committee on Transportation on Senate Bill 2, as found on page 56 of the Senate Journal, and also the Standing Committee on Local Government on Senate Bill 13, as found on page 56 of the Senate Journal, be adopted.
Comments on that motion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Before we go any further, with your indulgence, I would like to do a personal privilege. First of all, to announce that here a couple days ago, the arrival of my 7th grandchild, Lincoln Allen Roden, to my son Reggie and Jenny. He was 29 inches long, I think. No, maybe 20 inches. And also, my twin sister Lori is with me today, and I'll tell you a quick story. She brought to me this antique tobacco tin, about that big around, and gave it to me in my office. And inside, it was little containers and miscellaneous stuff from my father and my grandfather. It was all their war medals, the dog tags from my grandpa from World War I, and from my dad in World War II, and contained also the medal for my grandfather fought in the Battle of Ardennes in World War I, and the medal from my dad fought in the Battle of the Bulge in World War II. So pretty cool. Welcome, Lori. Thank you. Anybody have personal privileges before we get farther in? Okay. First reading of Senate bills.
Senate Bill 80, revised provisions regarding students and trainees engaged in the practice of funeral service. Senate Bill 81, prohibit the use of a firearms code for transactions involving firearms, accessories, components, and ammunition, and to provide a civil penalty therefore. Senate Bill 82, require an official declaration of war or other congressional action before the South Dakota National Guard may be deployed by the federal government.
Senate bills that have had their first reading are assigned as follows. Senate Commerce and Energy gets Senate Bill 81. Senate Health and Human Services gets Senate Bill 80. Senate Military and Veterans Affairs, Senate Bill 82. Joint Committee on Appropriations gets Senate Bill 33 and 44. Senate Ag and Natural Resources gets Senate Bill 34. Senate Commerce and Energy gets Senate Bill 24, 26, 28, 29, 31, 32, 47, 50, 67. Senate Judiciary gets Senate Bill 19, 37, 57, 62, 63, and 64. Senate Military and Veterans Affairs gets Senate Bill 52. Senate State Affairs gets Senate Bill 60, and Senate Transportation gets Senate Bill 45 and 46. Not done. Senate Education gets Senate Bill 71. Senate Ag Natural Resources gets Senate Bill 78. Senate Health and Human Services gets Senate Bill 76 and 77. And Senate Transportation gets SCR 601. Consent calendar.
Senator Wheeler requested that Senate Bill 1 be removed from the consent calendar. Remaining on consent, Senate Bill 38, modify requirements for a vehicle approaching a vehicle that is stopped or occupying the shoulder of the highway with warning lights flashing.
Senate Bill 38, having had its second reading, is up for consideration and final passage. Are there any questions? Hearing none, the question before the Senate is final passage of Senate Bill 38. Members in favor will vote aye. Those opposed, nay. Secretary will please call the roll.
Senators Beal, Blanc, Carly, Crabtree excused, Davis, Dibert, Duhamel, Foster, excused, Grove, Hone, Howard, Hulse excused, Jensen, Carr, Colbeck, Lapke, Larson, Marty, Mehlhaff, Ms. Gimmons, Nelson, Otten, Perry, Peterson, Pischke, Reed, Roll, Souter, Shanefish, Smith, Vilhauer, Voigt, Voida, Wheeler, Zickman. Mr. President, we have 32 yeas, 3 excused.
Senate Bill 38, having received a majority vote of the members elect, is hereby declared passed. Any questions on the title? Hearing none, the title is deemed correct. I have a few thank yous to read. First, thank you to Homes for South Dakota for breakfast in the President's Lobby. They are a coalition of the nonprofit housing entities throughout the state. Any representatives in the gallery? Also, we'd like to say thank you to Western Dakota Regional Water Systems for lunch in the President's Lobby. Any of those folks? And one more, also, we'd like to say thank you to Travel South Dakota for lunch provided today in the Capitol Rotunda. I think those folks have already left. Thank you to all those groups. Second reading of Senate bills. Debate calendar. First one.
Senate Bill 5, which has been amended, an act to permit a sheriff to charge a fee for satisfied or unsatisfied service of process.
Senate Bill 5, having had its second reading, is up for consideration and final passage. Are there any remarks? Senator Duhamel.
Thank you, Mr. President. My fellow senators, I ask for your favorable consideration of Senate Bill 5. This is an effort to give some relief to counties where taxpayers have been subsidizing mostly out-of-state collection firms. In the more populous counties, the savings would be in the tens of thousands. Due to current statutory language, county taxpayers are subsidizing private bill collecting organizations almost exclusively out of state, who are sending large amounts of unservable papers to take advantage of a loophole in the legal collection process. Current law allows a $50 fee be collected only if the paper is served. Unserved papers are only allowed to charge mileage, regardless of the amount of time spent receiving, processing, attempting to serve, or completing that return to sender. These papers are unservable for various reasons, to include invalid address, no physical address, maybe a P.O. box, an address outside of our county, the recipient has moved, the address is obviously abandoned, the recipient is deceased, or extremely outdated or insufficient information to positively identify or contact the correct person. Although these papers are returned unserved with a given reason, it's common for them to be sent back with no new information, usually within a couple of months. This is not an isolated concern, rather a tactic being used on a regular basis in an attempt to have a sheriff's office conduct free research and improve on their attempts at collecting debt at taxpayer expense. Not only is it costly, but it impacts the sheriff's office reputation. The proposed statutory language allows sheriffs more options for having the requesting business or the person using the service to cover the cost of that service instead of the taxpayer. I'm proposing an optional fee up to $50 and a mileage option of either a fixed $10 or the state rate of 0.08 cents per mile. This allows counties, both geographically large and small, to decide how to most efficiently and effectively cover costs associated with this service. This bill fixes a problem. This is asking those who ask for the service to pay for the service, not the taxpayer, as is the case right now. Just an example, if we look at what happened last year in Pennington County, if we were able to compensate for that, it'd be $138,000. In Minnehaha County, $150,000. This is real taxpayer money, and there's a big fleshing sound. And I hope you'll help us fix this problem. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Further remarks on Senate Bill 5? Senator Grove.
I listened in on that in the committee hearing, and I just wanted to add that for us smaller counties, we had our sheriff there from Hughes County who testified that there's a loss of like $12,000 to $15,000 in Hughes as well. So the big numbers are on our big cities, but it also impacts our small counties as well. So I would ask for your support on this. Thank you.
Further remarks? Any further remarks? Hearing none, the question before the Senate is final passage of Senate Bill 5. Members in favor vote aye. Those opposed, nay. Secretary will please call a roll.
Senators Beal, Blanc, Carly, Crabtree excused, Davis, Dybert, Duhamel, Foster excused, Grove, Hone, Howard, Hulse excused, Jensen, Carr, Colbeck, Lapke, Larson, Marty, Mehlhaff, Miskimmons, Nelson, Otten, Perry, Peterson, Pischke, Reed, Roll, Souter, Shanefish, Smith, Vilhauer, Voigt, Voida, Wheeler, Zickman. Mr. President, we have 32 yeas, 3 excused.
Senate Bill 5, having received an affirmative vote of the members elect, is hereby declared passed. Any questions on the title? Hearing none, title is deemed correct.
Senate Joint Resolution 502. A joint resolution applying to the United States Congress for a convention of states to propose amendments to the United States Constitution regarding the imposition of fiscal restraints on the federal government, further limiting the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, and limiting the terms of office for members of Congress and other federal officials.
SGR 502, having had its second reading, is up for consideration and final passage. Are there any remarks? Senator Mehlhaff.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the committee. Joint Resolution 502 calling for a Article 5 convention to address the 3 items that were mentioned by the Secretary. I'm priming this bill this year because I think most of us who observe Washington would agree that they're out of control. We're approaching $37 trillion in our national debt. The interest on the debt is larger than our defense budget. It's larger than our Medicare budget. Government waste is rampant, as many people have seen the recent Festivus report that's prepared by Senator Rand Paul, where he highlights government waste and abuse. A couple of the items on there were billions of dollars paid in COVID aid to deceased individuals, studies to study cats to see if they get motion sickness when they're on the treadmill. I never let my cat on the treadmill because I don't want to risk it. So, and there's several other things that we've all heard of. Another item that it addresses is term limits. I went out and I looked and checked the 50 longest serving members of Congress. All of them served well over 40 years. 12 of them died in office. 9 of them are still serving. We've recently watched Senator Dianne Feinstein, who used to be an articulate, powerful member of the Senate from California, fade away in office to where the last time I saw her in a committee, her staff were directing her on what to say and how to vote. Clearly not in control of her duties. We have a history in our own state. One of our longest serving, Senator Carl Munt, had a stroke in office, refused to resign, and spent his last 3 years in office unable to fulfill his duties and leaving South Dakotans without representation in the Senate. Recently, there was a report of a congressional member from Texas who had gone missing, though the social media account remained active and lots of pictures. They noticed that no votes had been cast for 6 months. She was found in a memory care unit in Texas. And finally, the power of the federal bureaucracy is out of control. I recently read an article by Justice Neil Gorsuch where he discussed how the federal bureaucratic state is exercising not only executive authority, they're exercising legislative authority, and they're also exercising judicial authority, somewhat curtailed by the recently overturning of the Chevron case. But the federal agencies they're the ones who are deferred to when deciding what they have the right to regulate and what they don't have the right to regulate. And just finally, just some personal experience I've had with the federal government. Many of you know I'm a retired state employee. I managed the grain warehouse division. And during that time, there was a publishing of proposed rules by the U.S. Warehouse Act. One of those rules was for the Federal Warehouse Act to preempt state merchandising programs, which we had in place. The federal government does not regulate that at this time, only warehouse activities. But they had in their proposed rules that should they decide to promulgate rules to do that, they would preempt the states and take away our rights to regulate and protect our producers. Naturally, there was a pretty big outpouring of negative comments to those rules, mostly from the state departments of agriculture. And they withdrew that rule from the published proposed rules. But when the final rules came out, it was back in. And it came along with the assurances of the federal bureaucrats that they would never exercise that against the states. So I think it's time that we use Article 5, which is a provision that was put in the Constitution by the framers to give the states an opportunity to bring the federal government to heel. And I think it's well past time that happened. Thank you very much. I'll stand by for questions.
Further remarks? Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Fellow senators, I stand in opposition to this resolution. I have not come to this decision lightly, as I have many people who I greatly respect and admire on both sides of this issue, probably including my Marine Corps brother who's watching right now. What tipped my decision was the words and the actions of our founding fathers who gathered in Philadelphia that summer. After 6 years of struggle under the Articles of Confederation, a convention was called by 12 state legislatures, no Rhode Island. 8 states gave their delegation the charge of, quote, revising the the federal Constitution, unquote. 3 states gave the direction, quote, revising the Articles of Confederation, unquote. New Jersey provided the most open-ended guidance, quote, devising such further provisions as shall appear necessary to render the Constitution of the federal government adequate to the exigencies, excuse my pronunciation there, unquote. Even the Confederation Congress gave guidance, quote, for the sole and express purpose of revising the Articles of Confederation, unquote. That 1787 convention was empowered by 12 states and the Confederate Congress to do an explicit task, to revise. Did they follow it? I have another question. Have you heard what historians have called the secrecy rule? That summer of 1787, the windows were shut and the shades were drawn. Madison wrote, quote, nothing spoken in this house be printed or otherwise published or communicated without leave, unquote. There was no press. There was no, quote, we the people, no transparency in Independence Hall. Thomas Jefferson, who was not there but was in France and Italy, disapproved of this rule. Quote, I am sorry they began their deliberations by such an abominable a precedent as that of tying up the tongues of their members. Nothing can justify this example but the innocence of their intentions and ignorance of the value of public discussions, unquote. On the other hand, James Madison, a convention participant, wrote the rule would, quote, effectually secure the requisite freedom of discussion and save both the convention and the community from 1,000 erroneous and perhaps mischievous reports. Are you with Jefferson or are you with Madison? I bring up these 2 examples because a convention begins, yes, with a written charge. But there are no rules for the convention, none. Just like in 1787, the rules of the convention are set at the convention by the delegates to the convention. Yes, a convention today could invoke a secrecy rule, just like in 1787. And yes, the convention could expand their charge beyond the scope set upon them, just like in 1787. If this is not true, why is the section 10 added to this resolution? Quote, be it further resolved, this application is made with the express understanding that an amendment that in any way seeks to amend, modify, or repeal any provision of the Bill of Rights is not authorized for consideration at this convention and is void if ever used to consider any change to any provision of the Bill of Rights, unquote. In closing, do we have the statesmen today like we had in 1787? Across our country, do we have George Washington's, Benjamin Franklin's, James Madison's to lead a successful convention? Men and women who will put God and country before money, ambition, power, and prestige. If there are, will the legislatures choose these types of men and women? Again, I refer back to the words in this resolution, quote, the legislature reserves the right to provide instructions to the state's delegates and may recall its delegates from the convention at any time for a breach of duty or a violation of instructions provided, unquote. Who decides the instruction? Who determines when to recall? And by what majority? If you have any doubts, if you have just one doubt about this, please vote against it. Thank you.
Further remarks? Senator Carley.
Thank you, Mr. President. So today, this is a difficult topic to speak on, as there's many in this body who I greatly respect and looked up to, who have different opinions on this issue. Both sides of the Convention of States issue are defended by very good people who truly believe in their arguments, and I can certainly see both sides. The goals of calling a convention are noble. Things like federal term limits, balanced budget amendments, and reduced spending are all issues most everyone in this room can see their way forward to agreeing to. I personally have spoken about the issue several times with Michael Ferris. He's the co-founder of the Convention of State Movement and a man I highly esteem for his work with the HSLDA, as well as Patrick Henry College, and as a general counsel for the National Religious Broadcasters, on whose governing board I also serve. However, there are some sobering arguments against holding a convention, and I'd like to share a few with you. We are told that we, the state legislature, will have all the power to circumvent Congress. In fact, the only power we have is to apply to Congress for this convention. Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution states that the Congress has the power to, quote, to make laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers, the few and enumerated powers listed, and all other powers vested by the Constitution, Article 5 included. I've been told that we, the state legislators, will ratify this. But Article 5 says the Congress may propose the method of ratification by either the state legislators or conventions of the several states. This could cut out state legislators, cut out completely. The only power that Article 5 guarantees us, the state legislators, is the right to apply to Congress for the convention. After that, the convention itself could propose changing the ratification to whatever they want. A proposal by the convention to change it to a simple majority of the states and or the people would most certainly be proposed and would be the most democratic way to ratify, they will say. If that doesn't scare you, it should. Look at the serious division of the people in our country today, and really in our body here with many issues, including this one. As recent as last session, this very body suspended the rules to do something out of bounds. Why would we think this couldn't happen with a convention for amendments? Even Chief Justice Warren Burger wrote in 1988, just a few years ago, quote, there's no effective way to limit or muzzle the actions of a constitutional convention. The convention could make its own rules and set its own agenda. After a convention is convened, it'll be too late to stop the convention if we don't like its agenda, end quote. There's an ever-growing body of citizens and globalists on both sides who would like to see this government burnt down and rebuilt. We've witnessed that. They never tell us what that would look like, and they aren't South Dakota nice or fair or following rules. Our Declaration of Independence, allowing for the birth of this nation and the separation from the tyranny of England, states, quote, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, meaning the protections of our people, of our self-evident rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute new government. With this recognized right, what is it to stop the America haters from doing this at the convention? Senator Barry Goldwater, whose son I just recently met a couple weeks ago, he stated in 1979, before he knew to call it a convention of states, he said that, quote, if we hold a constitutional convention, every group in the country, majority, minority, middle of the road, left, right, up, down, is going to get its 2 bits in. And we're going to wind up with a constitution that will be so far different from the one we've lived under for 200 years that I doubt the republic could continue, end quote. So some might ask, do we do nothing? Or do we have another option? Well, I feel at this point we do. One is elections. We vote out those not upholding their duty to the Constitution and to the people. This actually just happened across South Dakota in the primaries, as well as the federal level. Another option is nullification. We don't seem to use that one much, and as long as we are not willing to take the strings attached with federal government money, we will not have the leverage we should over federal overreach. The 9th and 10th Amendments to the Bill of Rights makes it clear that when the Congress goes outside of its authority granted by the states and its people, it is us as citizens that must resist deny, and oppose those abuses of power. When we have always had these powers, why have we not been using them? Do we blame the document that enshrined these powers as the problem? Or ourselves for not enforcing and applying our own powers? Challenging this incredible existing document cannot force them to comply. That responsibility was given to us. Let's just enforce it. There are many people like the esteemed former Senator Rick Santorum who spoke in committee, who believe wholeheartedly that this is the way forward. But there are also many who, while previously having the same opinion, have looked into it further and now have flipped to the other side of the issue. For example, Glenn Beck, after a decade of supporting an Article 5 convention of the states, he said just 18 months ago, quote, "I have been a supporter of the Article 5 Convention of States. I have been a pretty big supporter, a vocal supporter. I am reversing that today because after some real thought and prayer, we are not the people to open up this sacred document. We are not the people. That was a God-inspired document that was divinely written. You can read that from I don't know how many founders. The very hand of God was involved. Benjamin Franklin even said that the very hand of God was involved in writing that document. Do you believe that we could send that kind of delegate today? Someone who, when they got to an impasse, somebody like Ben Franklin would say, let's pause and go to church and pray. Well, they did not politic. They prayed. I am not for opening up that Constitution anymore because we are not that people anymore. When we are that people, I will be for it. When we have demonstrated our humility and our obedience to God, and I'm afraid it'll take a massive beatdown of the country to get to that place, then I'll be for it again. Someday we will be humble enough. We will recognize God. Someday we will not be an enemy of God. We will not be so arrogant. When we are those people, I will support the Constitution, Convention of States. But I withdraw my support, and I'm sorry to say that. It is because this Constitution is wholly inadequate for anyone other than a religious and moral people. We are not those people, and we should not stain this document. End quote from Glenn Beck. Congressman Harriet Hagman of Wyoming, who I recently met in Rapid City, agrees that the solution is to enforce the Constitution as it currently exists, rather than seek to amend it. And 90% of the issues would go away. As a constitutional lawyer, she reflects that she simply does not see the framework anywhere to prevent, for example, a runaway convention. While nine states in the past 9 years have rescinded all their Article 5 applications, and even California thought to rescind theirs at the same time, California Governor Gavin Newsom publicly called for a convention to severely limit the Second Amendment. Here's the printout from the California website I printed out last night. There's Newsom calling for the 28th Amendment to be done in a constitution to limit your gun rights. Additionally, he's in a race with Joe Biden to produce the 28th Amendment, a different one from Newsom, the so-called ERA Amendment. This was on the White House website just yesterday, at least as of yesterday morning. I think it's a dangerous route to go down. For those reasons, please join me in voting no on this resolution. Thank you.
Further remarks? Senator Carr.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm one of those guys that likes to knock on doors. As a legislator, it's like my favorite part of the job because I think it gives the folks that live in our district, the folks across South Dakota, a chance to touch their legislator, talk to them, and feel connected to their government. I don't think they feel that way about the federal government. I don't feel that way about the federal government, but that's what I like about the state legislature. This is one of those unique bills that we're reaching out and we're trying to touch our federal government, and we're trying to provide some instruction. Here's what I observed over the last 8 years of being involved here and hearing the Article 5 arguments. I've observed that no matter which side of this you're on, we all love our country. We love our country, we want what's best for it, and we all have a distrust of the government fixing itself. However, the reason I've supported this, and the reason I support the Article 5, is it's doing something at a time when I think something needs to be done. at a time when the federal government hasn't self-corrected. Well, we could elect different folks. We've tried that over the years. I think the good senator from Pierre talked about how hard it has been to uproot some of those senators that have been there for decades. Maybe we should send them a note. Maybe we should send them a resolution. Wait, we've done that. I've been here in this legislature, sent a resolution to our representatives, our senators in DC, saying, hey guys, it's time. It's time to do something about this deficit, about balancing our budget, and about term limits. We've done that. I think it's always kind of fun when we sit here and speculate what the founding fathers would say. I'm not going to tell you what they'd say, I don't know. But I think I don't care who you name from history, if they were here right now and we said, here's what's going on in our federal government, what do you think about this? And say, let's keep waiting to see if they fix it themselves in DC. Maybe? I don't know. I don't know what they'd say, but I'm pretty sure they wouldn't like what they would see and where we're at in this country. I keep hearing this term, runaway convention. I'd ask, what path do you think this country's on now? What path are we on? I think the train left the station already. I think the train has left the station and we are in the red zone. The alarms are going off. Our debt is going up by $1 trillion every 4 months. Things are out of control. We've been printing money like madmen. I think the future of the country is at stake, and I think the future generations are going to have a huge mess to clean up here. This is a tool of the Constitution. I can't guarantee what it looks like if we do this, but I do believe that common sense will prevail. I do believe that we will ratify it. It would take 3/4 of the states. That's why I think it helps keep things on the rails to say it still has to come back to the states to ratify this. If the folks across this country were so bent on driving this country into some weird place, they could do that now. They could be out there electing those officials and lobbying our senators and congressmen in DC and take it to a completely different place. I just think we're speculating ourselves and we're fear-mongering to a level that isn't real. Okay, things would have to get ratified. Do I know exactly what that looks like? No, but I know this. Here's where I'm at, guys, folks, is that I'm not willing to go any further. I'm willing to try to do something and use a tool that's part of the Constitution. And that's the Article 5. Versus just sit and wait and hope that Congress and DC goes, hey guys, let's finally change. Like they didn't get the memo before, they've got the memo. They've got the memo. We thought, during the 80s, we had Reagan, we thought, well, we're just gonna grow out of it. Everything's great, we got Reagan now, we're gonna grow out of it. And here we sit, decades later, in more debt than ever. Maybe you're sitting there going, well, Trump and Doge and all those guys, they're gonna fix this and figure it out. God, I hope so. But we thought that in the 80s. We thought we'll grow out of it. You really think we can even grow out of it at this point? Not if we don't change the level of spending that we're doing. We can't keep up with this. This is unsustainable. So the folks that don't want to support Article 5, I just ask you, what do you really want to do? You want to keep sending those memos? You want to keep trying to find somebody else to run and change Congress? It doesn't seem to have that big of effect. We've seen it for decades happen now, and nothing's changed. I'm willing to support this. I'd ask for your support as well.
Further remarks? Senator Perry.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sometimes to remain silent is the easy thing to do, but what we need to do sometimes is look at the things that we're talking about objectively on both sides and come out with a statement. There's a process for amending the U.S. Constitution. The Convention to propose amendments to the United States Constitution, also referred to as Article 5 Convention or a mandatory convention, is one of two methods authorized by Article 5 of the United States Constitution. SJR 502 is an amendment to the United States Constitution. It may be proposed on this application of 2/3 of the state legislators of the Congress, and they shall call a convention for proposing amendments, which will become law only after ratification by 3/4 of the states. We're not just going to do this overnight. We've been talking about this for a long time. Sometimes it's time to put your boots on and start walking. It's time to do things. And basically what I'd like to end with is we have some tough decisions, and change sometimes is very healthy. I'd like to see a change. I'd like to see our government get better. Thank you.
Further remarks? Does any member wish to speak before Senator Mehlhaff speaks a second time in closing? Hearing none, Senator Mehlhaff in closing.
Thank you, Mr. President. I certainly do appreciate the views and the concerns that have been raised by opponents to Article 5 convention. But the one point that just stands out is why Article 5 was put in. It was put in, Justice Scalia often talked about why the framers put it in there. It was put in because they understood that at some point the federal government could grow and become influenced by so many other special interests that would pull them away from their constituents and their state legislatures back home. That's why Article 5 was put in as a second means to bring forward amendments to our Constitution. Congress right now could bring amendments to the Constitution. I believe in 1994, they came within one vote of adding a balanced budget amendment. But they didn't quite get there. Somebody always finds a reason why they can't do it. Our government is slipping away. We've heard people talking about it with our debt and the way that we're going to lose things. We've just heard recently, within the last 4 years, talk about getting rid of the filibuster, packing the Supreme Court, adding additional states, more senators, Puerto Rico, DC. If that happens, our country's gone. We'll lose the Second Amendment and many other things that we've seen. Our First Amendment rights over the last few years have been trampled on terribly by this federal government. And Congress just does not have the fortitude to bring it to heel. The elitists in Washington are taking our freedoms away bit by bit. They're doing it by delegating authority to the federal bureaucracy. They're doing it by bringing lawsuits, getting in front of the Supreme Court, extending more power to the government over the states through amendments like the Commerce Clause and others. And Justice Scalia did say, yeah, there is some danger. There is a possibility that a Congress could, or Article 5 convention could get out of control. But we have the precedent that all they can do is propose amendments. And then those amendments have to be ratified by 38 states. That's 76 chambers, 75 if you count Nebraska. One of those chambers, just one chamber, refused to do it. 13 states could stop it. So with that, I would just say that in the case of the risk at hand, I think what we have is a very sick patient in the United States, and certainly doing surgery, life-saving surgery, you could lose it on the table, but it's very unlikely. But if you do nothing, you're going to lose it for certain. So I would urge you to vote yes on this resolution.
Hearing no further remarks, the question before the Senate is final passage of Senate Joint Resolution 502. Members in favor will vote aye. Those opposed, nay. Secretary will please call the roll.
Senators Beal, Blanc, Carly, Crabtree, excused, Davis, Dybert, Duhamel, Foster, excused, Grove, Hone, Howard, Hulse, excused, Jensen, Carr, Colbeck, Lapke, Larson, Marty, Mehlhaff, Miskimmons, Nelson, Otten, Perry, Peterson, Pischke, Reed, Roll, Souter, Shanefish, Smith, Vilhauer, Voigt, Voida, Wheeler, Zickman. Mr. President, we have 23 yeas, 9 nays, 3 excused.
Senate Joint Resolution 502, having received an affirmative vote of majority of members elect, is hereby declared passed. I have to say, in my 20-some years down here, that's probably the 99th time I've heard a debate on Article 5, at least. Announcements.
All right, Rita, we're back. You just heard it, 23-9, SJR 502 just passed in the South Dakota Senate. Wow, this is just an amazing victory for the South Dakota team. For those who were not watching, Rita, can you just give a quick recap on what just happened?
Wow, it was just amazing, Andrew. I'm so excited. So we just heard the South Dakota Senate debate and then vote on our South Dakota Convention of States application, SJR 502, which sailed through its committee last Friday with a vote of 8-1. So this was super exciting. We heard our amazing sponsor, Senator Mehlhaff, begin and introduce the resolution. He talked about it being time to bring the federal government to heel. That was kind of his summary, which I think is a really good summary. That's exactly what Convention of States action is all about. He talked about its capacity to really address federal government waste, fraud, and abuse. He mentioned, funny but just tragic thing to find your federal government is spending money to research putting cats on treadmills and whether they get motion sickness. That's what our federal government has been spending our hard-earned money on. So Convention of States is one of the ways that we can finally impose fiscal restraints on Congress from the outside. It's going to take the states to do this. He talked about the importance of term limits and how long certain members of Congress have been serving, and the fact that it just doesn't serve the nation well to have people spending a lifetime in Congress. So yeah, for him, it was all about bringing the federal government to heel. We did hear a couple of opponents get up and spout all the usual misinformation about Convention of States. We heard them talk about, say that the founding fathers effectively were scoundrels who disobeyed the public trust, disobeyed their commissions, and gave us a runaway convention. Well, that isn't true, folks. If you want to find out why, go to our website, conventionofstates.com. We've got all of the correct historical information there for you to read. But yeah, lots of misinformation spread about Convention of States. Don't buy it. We have all the answers available for you and resources on our website. Then we had a couple of wonderful other South Dakota senators who support Convention of States get up and talk about why they supported it. Just great champions for COS, talking about, are we really going to keep thinking that elections are going to fix the problem? They haven't fixed them yet. Why do we keep thinking that we're going to do the same things we've been doing and get a different result? So just a lot of good positive statements in addition to the crazy. And Andrew, I think we have Convention of States Action Regional Director Deanna Beckett standing by. Deanna, congratulations. This is your home state, right? How are you feeling?
I am very excited. It has been a long time coming, and I apologize for the background noise. I'm in a different state capital today, and so excited to see the work. I think when we passed the committee, question was asked by Mark that was asking about the evolution of it, and I failed to answer it. And it's just so amazing how, when the work we do, the work that the team has done to build those relationships, how it has completely shifted who is supporting us and what positions they are in. And we have, the support of our champions, our leadership, and how much we can get done when we have leadership on our side.
Deanna, congratulations. And I just want to ask you, what do you have to say about the South Dakota grassroots who've been working so diligently for years now to get to this point? And what's your word of encouragement as it goes from the Senate to the House?
Oh my goodness, it's hard to say because it's 10 years. This is year 10 for Shirley. She has been in Pierre. She lives there many, many days, sometimes weeks, and continually just is present on the floor. The team, comes around and does events all year. They do educational events. They've done fairs. They've done coffees. They've done so much all these years, and it's proud to be a part. I'm proud to be a part of it. And moving forward, we've just got 2 more steps, and we've got to keep on going. So now is not the time to sit back. And like I said on Friday, when we pass, it's not the time to sit back either. I mean, take a break, take a breather, and rest. But we still got to continue to educate legislators for years and years.
That's right, Deanna. Congratulations to you. And you mentioned our amazing South Dakota State Director, Shirley Meyer. Shirley, if you're watching, congratulations to you and just the rest of that amazing South Dakota team. This was a hard-earned victory, and we are so proud of you and can't wait to see what happens next as our application moves over to the South Dakota House. So, Deanna, thanks for being with us. And I understand we have Mark Meckler ready to join us as well. Mark,
hey.
What'd you think?
I loved it. It was incredible. It's exciting. It's overwhelming to see those kind of numbers. There's a lot of lessons in this. We've been doing this for 11 years now, and I learned something every time we're in a legislature. Every year is different. And one of the things to remember from this is every year is different. And last year, I think if we had made it to the floor, if we had seen a Senate debate like this, we'd have passed. I think we had the votes. I think we've had the votes for several years in South Dakota, but we had leadership that was opposed to us, just a few people. And in fact, the committee chair was opposed to us. He's no longer in the legislature, and boom, we go sailing through. So I think one of the important things to remember is when you get frustrated about what's going on in a legislature, remember that often it's just 1 or 2 people that can hold it up. It doesn't mean we don't have the support. It doesn't mean the grassroots haven't done the job they have to do. It doesn't mean everything isn't in place. It just means, you got 1 or 2 more pieces on the table that have to be moved. And that's the case here. Another thing I want to point out is when we lose a floor vote, and this one obviously was a blowout on the win side, but when we lose a floor vote, it's usually because just a few Republicans vote against us and they vote with all the Democrats or the majority of the Democrats. And so it's really an interesting conundrum that we run into. You get Democrats that, in my opinion, have been bamboozled by the radical left. They are in league now with Common Cause, Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, Planned Parenthood, La Raza, MoveOn.org, Daily Cause, all these folks that are against us. They use the exact same talking points. And we heard our opponents today, who are alleged conservatives, using the same talking points that all those groups use. And it's disingenuous at this point. They know that they're saying things that are untrue. You know, they mentioned, you heard this big thing about the 1787 convention was a runaway. I know, Rita, you mentioned that. I just want to hold this up. Literally a law review article, the longest research piece ever written on this. This was written in April of 2017 by Michael Ferris. It's called Defying Conventional Wisdom. It's in the Harvard Journal of Law and Policy. And those legislators that still say 1787 was a runaway convention, I'm just going to be blunt at this point. They're liars because they know this exists. We provide this to them. They either refuse to read it or they read it and just refuse to believe what's in it. It's factual. It's literally, I don't know, it's got like 300 footnotes in it. It's unbelievably incredible. It is the definitive article on the 1787 convention. So the fact that people still slander the framers of our Constitution, and then the part that amazes me the most, Rita, is they say, we don't have men like Washington and Adams and Franklin around anymore. You know, the kind of men who do things they're not allowed to do and breach their honor and their integrity by running away in a convention. I mean, I don't understand. It makes no sense. I'm just glad reason and sanity prevailed, and I'm super proud of our grassroots. And a special shout out to Shirley Meyer, who's been here the whole time. Our state director travels all over the state and is always there in Pierre. I hope she's celebrating this victory right now.
Mark, there was a. Sorry, Rita. Mark, there were several people who were speaking in opposition, but there was a couple that were proponents who said some really wise things. They didn't get tied up with all of the theory and the process and stuff like that. But there was one, Senator Carr, who talked about future generations are going to inherit a mess if we don't do anything. And he just was really speaking to how it's incumbent upon the state legislatures around the country to do what the federal government or Washington, D.C. won't do. And then Senator Perry, he said this, he said, sometimes it's time to put on your boots and just get walking. You know, as we start to open up across the country, as legislatures start to open up across the country and consider our resolution, what do you think state legislatures and state legislators should be thinking as they start considering our resolution?
Yeah, I think they should be thinking long term. They should be thinking about their kids and their grandkids and what's the country going to look like 20 years, 30 years, 40 years from now if we don't do this. Look, I'm really glad Donald Trump's in office. It was an exciting day yesterday, but we saw what happens after a Trump administration or after a Republican administration. When you get liberals in office, they erase almost everything, just like Trump is erasing the Biden administration with the stroke of a pen. And if we want this stuff to be permanent, if we want to balance the budget, if we want term limits, if we want to do with the Department of Education and the EPA and the Department of Energy, then it's up to us to get it in gear, to put the boots on and get walking.
I loved it. That was a great summary. That is exactly what we need to do. And today the South Dakota Senate put on its boots and started walking, and they're going to go the distance. If you missed it, that vote today, that victory vote in the South Dakota Senate was 23-9. That is a resounding victory, and we are just so proud of South Dakota. So,
well, Rita, Rita, I think it's about time for us to wrap up today. Mark, thank you for dropping by. And Deanna, if you're still on, thank you so much for being here. And congratulations to you, to the entire South Dakota team, and to just all of the COS Patriots out there who are doing the hard work in South Dakota and all across the country. Rita, we're going to be back when the House considers our resolution in South Dakota, and hopefully South Dakota will become state number 20. I know we're waiting on pins and needles for that first committee hearing to happen, and then for the full floor vote in the House. But you're going to have to come back, and we'll do another episode on that. Until then, Rita, we're going to have to get back to work.
Let's do it.
Thanks for being here with
some
me.
more victories.
Thanks, guys.